Good evening, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day. Thanks for joining us. I'll call us to order here at 6:30. We have all 5 board directors in attendance. And we also have Emma joining us on the dais tonight, our student board representative, and she is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Could you all stand?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That brings us to agenda item 2.01. Please have a motion to approve our regular meeting agenda.
I move to approve the regular meeting agenda.
Director Wiggins moved and Director Pendergraft seconded. Do we have discussion?
Yes, due to unforeseen circumstances, we need to table agenda item 5.01 until a future meeting, and we also need to table agenda item 5.07, which is our first reading to revise policy 6114 titled Gifts, to a future date.
Any other discussion? Call for the vote to approve the regular meeting agenda as revised to table agenda items 5.01 and 5.07 to a future board meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion passes 5-0, and we'll move on to public comment, which we don't have tonight. So we will skip. We will move past 3.01 to our student board representative report, and we've got Emma here. Welcome.
Thank you. All right, so there's lots happening over the past couple weeks. So we have had our winner students of the quarter, which was basically selected for each department, as well as AP Scholar, which was to celebrate our AP Scholars. AP Scholars with honors and distinction, as well as other levels. And as you know, the AP courses at the high school are nothing short of rigorous and require a lot of dedication and commitment. And so it was very special for our juniors and seniors to come together and celebrate those achievements. Next, with our sports, we had boys swim and dive. They placed second at districts, which was the highest they've ever placed in the history. And they're moving on to state. Our Tahoma girls basketball and boys and girls wrestling are also moving on to state. And our Tahoma cheer team just competed at nationals in Florida. We always talk about sports, but we do really take pride in that. And we're kind of just known for our hard work and dedication that we bring to those. So part of Tahoma Cares is our partnerships. And so something really big that happened for us was the legislative conference that happened yesterday. So myself included and 3 other board reps and representatives from the school board, the PTA, the teachers union, and transportation. We all traveled down to Olympia to discuss with local legislators about the district's priorities for funding. And I've never really experienced anything like that, and so that was a very, very cool experience. And I really feel like the legislators took time to hear what we had to say, and they were very involved with what we were talking about. For me in particular, I really focus on mental health, and that's something that hits close to home. And so that was really a great experience for me to talk about that and relate that to funding and just in general, really putting an emphasis on student wellness. And then lastly, we have the high school and beyond night that will be happening at the high school. It's coming up at the beginning of March, and this is just an opportunity for students and their families to learn more about after high school plans, as well as learning about careers in colleges. And this really connects to our equity as well as wellness and involving students and their families in learning more about that process. So, yeah.
All right. That brings us to section 5 of our agenda. As we move to this presentations, discussion, and action items portion of our agenda, I would like to remind my fellow board directors that we have agreed on using round robin to ensure that each member has an equal opportunity to speak, and we will keep our discussion length per agenda item to 20 minutes, which I will monitor at individual board members' discussion to 3 minutes per agenda item, which Mrs. Wheeler will monitor for us. Each director's time will begin with the first word they speak and will continue through the responses they provide. And with that, we will move to, I'm going to keep our numbering the same, agenda item 5.02, which is a report from our Ad Hoc Budget Committee representative, Director of Finance and Operations, Lori Cloud, and Chief Financial Officer, Leonard Hernandez. Public Relations Director, AJ Garcia, will present information and answer questions for the board, and we have some of our community members here as well. Welcome. Yay, Katie and Jenny and Emma.
So you may remember a few months ago, you all pulled a few names out of a hat, and Katie and Judy were a couple of those names to participate in our Ad Hoc Budget Committee. This was a group that really got together to be able to take a look at our budget and some line items and look at our revenues and expenditures and the unfunded, underfunded mandates that our schools adhere to, and bring a new perspective to it and be able to bring questions and considerations back to you all as you're preparing to begin the cycle for this upcoming fiscal year's budget, as we look ahead for the years to come when we think about our Tahoma 100 journey that we've started with our community, being able to think about how we're going to continue to provide an amazing experience for our kids, while also being really fiscally responsible and being good stewards with our community's contributions is an important part of that puzzle too. So it was great to see this group come together, just as someone who really didn't play a huge role in the discussion, but got to sit back and watch a lot of it. I was super fascinated by the group of people that we had there, a lot of people with a lot of different experiences and perspectives from our community. It really felt like a really well-represented group of stakeholders in that room. So a quick reminder of the purpose. Again, it was bringing questions and considerations. So this is not a recommending body. This was a group that, aside from Lori and Bill and Mike and some folks in this building and all of you who really get into the weeds of our budget and you live in it every single day. These are folks who got to start with Budget 101 and then kind of work their way into the weeds a little bit and just get fresh sets of eyes on our spending and the way we bring in revenue, and then be able to bring in new ideas. Are there things that maybe you haven't thought of before, or could we try something new? And so it was great to hear a lot of the thinking that was happening, and then led up to our meetings, which these guys are going to talk about a little bit more too.
Thank you, AJ. So back to what AJ said as far as the beginning of the group and what we focused on. Our actual first 3 meetings were really focused on bringing in a knowledge base and getting an understanding of Tahoma's budget and where we sit fiscally. We started at a really high level and kind of State of the Union and talked a lot about our glide path that you are all very well aware of, that you've seen a number of times, and how we are currently utilizing the fund balance and spending that down, and how that was purposeful, and knowing that we needed to come up with a plan going forward to ensure that our revenues and expenditures are in line. And spent really deep diving into how the district's funded, where it comes from, what drives the revenue, and then dove into the actual expenditures and drove down to a level of expenditure detail that you as the board sees on a monthly basis, and walked the group committee through all of that, delving into the actual object, all the way down to object code. So really a deep dive. And then, as AJ said, really spent some time looking at revenue versus expenditures and how we're funded versus what we're spending and where our levy dollars are currently going. And after that education, bringing that knowledge base up, got the group together to really start having some conversations about, as AJ said, about personal experiences expertise that they could bring to the table. Bill?
And along the way, through the education process, we had the group during the entire meeting, especially at the end of the meeting, write down their questions and considerations that just as they come up. That happened across 3 of our first meetings, and then in our last meeting, we got the group together, went through all of the questions and considerations that everyone put together over the last 3 months, and said, hey, here's a list of everything that everybody in the room is concerned about, has questions about. What do you think are most important to each and every one of you? We broke them up into 4 separate groups. Each group spent an hour going through this list of, I think it was 67 different questions and considerations that they wanted to meet people. And each group determined the top 10 items that they wanted to bring up, which is what you see pictures of right now. After presenting each group presented their top 10 items to each other. We then had them vote using little orange sticky notes of which are the most critical areas that we want to bring up today. We were able to group those into 3 primary categories. The first and foremost being clear communication around our budget, which Emma's going to talk a little bit about. The second being unfunded and underfunded mandates, which Katie's going to talk about. And then the third being our levy considerations. I'll pass it over to him.
All right, so a lot of what we talked about was communication, and I think every group had transparency as a top priority when it comes to the budget, and this just is two-way communication between the district and the community, and keeping the community updated on how the money is being spent and just on monetary impacts of decisions made by the district. So part of that we talked about was educating different groups of people where the budget impacts them the most, including the Booster Club, PTA, and teachers. I feel like with my personal experience, I was a little bit hesitant going into joining the budget committee because I don't pay taxes and I don't pay property taxes, so I was like, I don't really know how this would impact me. But I ended up really having, it was a very great experience for me, and I learned a lot about the budget, and I took a lot away, and so I can only imagine how much teachers and parents and community members would learn who actually pay property taxes, how much they would learn in just learning about the budget and how certain decisions will impact them, and it all relates back to transparency. In addition, with clear communication, we always want to demonstrate how the district is being a good steward of money. And this can be shown through clean audits and expansion of Budget 101, seen on the slide as Budget 101, and it really goes in depth to all the different nitty-gritty parts of the budget process. But there's still improvements and expansion of that, and so that can be a consideration that we take into account. And then just to conclude, clear communication is ultimately what is going to build trust in the district. And so just keeping that two-way communication very transparent and just in general educating community members better will create more trust and better process with the budget. So.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about unfunded and underfunded mandates. So part of the communication and transparency is a lot of the people, or most of the people in the group on the committee didn't really realize that there were a lot of unfunded and underfunded mandates. So like the dyslexia testing and the background checks for staff and volunteers. You know, if you don't really realize how that impacts the budget and everything, then you kind of don't, you know, I think a lot of community members think, oh, you know, Tahoma is a good district, it has a lot of money, you know, people move there because it's a great school district and the housing prices are high, so the school district is getting a lot of money.
So just understanding the unfunded mandates. This is a very short list, and I guess the full list is about 5 pages long. And Lori's working to get an updated list because this is a few years old. But just like things like special education, PPE, especially during COVID, there's a lot of things that are mandated that either have no funding or not much funding that the school district has to figure out how to pay for somehow. So yeah, just we were talking about budget 101 community nights where people can come together and learn about the different things so that they have a better understanding of the district's budget.
So I was chosen to talk about the levy consideration, and something that kept coming up when we discussed this was promises made, promises kept. So we can understand as well it'd be difficult to show where each of the dollars from the levy was spent. I think it's important to spend some time trying to elaborate and share with the community, where examples of where we are spending the money, like, nurses and how we were funded for 1.5. But we have 12, like that's really valid, and it's a great thing that we do. So, and then we also thought that it would be valuable to have an explanation of how our property taxes are affected when we run levies. Just to piggyback on everything that Emma said, the communication is just really key for having a successful levy. And you can see from my last section, or wondering. So a few weeks ago, a question came up from a parent that said, when you look at this list and you have to cut the budget, what are you going to cut? Or what would be the first thing to go? And nobody in the room could come up with something. There's no idea. Because every one of those programs are important to our kid. It's not my kid, it's your kid. So our final consideration is for the board to increase the levy ask to return to revenue.
So with those considerations and questions in mind, some ideas of what would be coming next immediately from this group, a couple of quick action steps is we're looking to get a budget communication specific subcommittee built from this group where we would look at some opportunities like Katie had mentioned to be able to present some budget information to our community and give them an opportunity to get a little bit of the one-on-one that our full committee was able to get and continue to provide that communication along the way. A lot of people are going to be getting their tax information in the mail soon, and we'll be looking at their property taxes and assessed valuation and seeing the way that the levy numbers change, and are going to be wondering what the heck does that mean. So giving them opportunities to fully understand where their dollars are going in terms of state school funding, but also our local school funding right here at Tahoma. We mentioned the Budget 101 page. The 101 page was something that we built about a year ago now, and was a great tool for us to be able to use with our committee. But then as more and more questions and considerations came up, there were things like the unfunded and underfunded mandates that we thought, we don't actually have that list on there yet. That's something that we could add and just give people a little bit more of that in-depth information as well too. And then as we continue to move forward with our work around this budget, as you may need more questions, considerations, extra sets of eyes to look at things, as we do other work and think about the implications that it's going to have on our budget, being able to call on the folks that were in our large committee who now have this much higher level of understanding than even a lot of people that work within our system who may not know about the unfunded, underfunded mandates and may not be well versed in our revenues and expenditures. We now have a group of about 30 stakeholders that really have a good understanding. So to be able to tap into them as a resource and lean on their expertise is going to be a super valuable tool for us for sure. Anything you want to add? Questions? Yep.
I'm just curious, in general, I'm not asking for specific dates, but what timeline do you see this kind of falling into in terms of like the things you talked about, the upcoming pieces? When do you see that?
Sure. So are you speaking to the items that AJ just referred to? I think some of those items are happening as we speak as far as updating the budget page. I know that AJ and Bill are currently working on some suggestions from that group on what that looks like and adding some items. I think there's already been a couple that you've already been working on and building on. So that's happening immediately. As far as utilizing the group, as far as the levy implications for the tax items, Bill's already been starting to work on a tool that would be accessed by anybody off probably off the website. So we're thinking that they can go in and plug some numbers in and get some data and information for their own personal information. And then as far as going forward on utilizing these highly trained budget people that we have now, as we're going through the process of our potential levy groups and our audit groups bringing in, if questions come up that we need answered, this would be the perfect opportunity with this resource to grab either a small or a large number of those people to come in and provide feedback and questions that we maybe haven't thought of as we're going through that budgeting process. So it's a matter of when that's going to happen. I would imagine we'll start seeing that within the next few months. So, some sort of a plan. And that's another one. Thank you for that reminder. That was one of the other things that came out of the group about making sure that when we talk about communication and utilizing our resources is including our students, their partners. And we said, yeah, we can't forget to make sure we're bringing our students down to Olympia, and I have to speak. I was there, super impressive to hear these students speak very intelligently and eloquently, and really sharing their personal stories of what it means to them for very specific, very sophisticated topics that they actually get. So super impressed and humbled to see what occurred down there with those students.
I have a series of questions. So first, Jenny, buckle up. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding. Just kidding. So you mentioned at the end of your portion of this presentation that the recommendation of the committee was to keep or raise the levy rate so that we could stay cost neutral. I just want to reiterate that to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. And was that a unanimous agreement?
And we didn't vote on it, but we discussed why we don't ask for the full amount available to us in the levy gas. So
I think every group has that.
So that might go back to Bill's sticky notes too. So we didn't have the rankings up there, but when the group threw up their sticky notes, the three things that these ladies all discussed, those were the top three big buckets that came out of that. And around the levy was, has the district considered potentially raising the levy ask to be able to offset the deficit spending?
Perfect. Okay, thank you. And then Lori, have you crunched the numbers at all? Do you know ballpark what that new rate would be if we were cost neutral?
No, we're actually still waiting for the final assessed valuation numbers and working on those within the next, I would say we'll have those down by the end of this month.
Okay, and last question. You guys you're acing it. You're check. The last question is, was there any discussion about increasing the rate above cost neutral to provide additional programming, or was the group consensus that we really just needed to get back to neutral, and that's what our community would be open to agreeing to?
So it felt like it was, I want to say that it was at $2, and then the max is $2.50. So I think that when we were talking about it, we were talking about going to the max of $2.50.
Okay, perfect. And I'm gonna say that into the microphone so other people can hear. So you were talking about doing a max of $2.50. Okay, perfect.
Which recommendation, one of the considerations that the group would have is around that. So not making an official recommendation for it to be increased.
Okay, thank you. This feedback is incredibly important to us, so I'm really grateful for all of the time. You've devoted many hours to this, so thank you for all of your time and effort and energy, and it's really helpful to hear you present tonight, so thank you.
Yeah, Lord, I just ask, that every month, make sure that levy dollar amount's the correct amount, and that it is covering, if it's not going to cover something or a certain amount, that we find out that way. Appreciate it.
And I would just say, I'll clarify something that I remember hearing, that if in a growing district, if we are hoping that our fund balance maintains in a particular percentage, in a growing district, we have to run at a slight surplus in order to keep our fund balance at the same percentage. We talked about that to some degree, so I just want to point that out as well. And echo Director Hollowell's comments. I was there with you, and a lot of time went into this effort. It's incredibly valuable information. I heard tremendous dialogue going on, a lot of really good questions and learning going on, and I really appreciate all the input that you put in. We appreciate the community being here tonight. And on behalf of the rest of the committee, just a big thank you for being engaged and involved and leaning into this. It's really helpful. So, big thanks. Okay, very good. We'll move on. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
We are at agenda item 5.03, action to approve elementary Camp Casey field trips. And is there a motion to approve agenda item 5.03?
I move to approve agenda item 5.03, action to approve elementary Camp Casey.
Dr. Wiggins moved and Dr. Pendergraph second. We have with us Shadow Lake Elementary Dean of Students, David Abbey, to answer questions from the board and present some information for us. Welcome.
Good evening, thank you so much. Besides being the Dean of Students at Shadow Lake Elementary, I also get the privilege of helping coordinate and direct our Camp Casey outdoor education experience. Unfortunately, Camp Casey, the last time we went to Camp Casey was the spring of 2019. We were about 2 weeks shy of heading to camp when everything shut down back in 2020. So believe it or not, right now, every single one of our middle school students, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, that entire group has not experienced Camp Casey. We've been over the last couple of years, we've been doing Camp Casey type experiences with our 5th graders at the elementary schools to give them some sort of Camp Casey-ish experience without being at camp. We're really excited as COVID restrictions are starting to lift that the possibility of returning to camp, or Camp Casey in particular, was there. We've been talking with Camp Casey and SPU. Camp Casey is owned by Seattle Pacific University as a conference and retreat center. Really excited to be working with them and really hoping that on November 1st, when all of the COVID restrictions lifted across the state, that would also mean that Camp Casey was fully open. Much to our chagrin, it wasn't, and Camp Casey has been saying we don't think we're going to be able to do it, which forced us to be looking into some other camps and other facilities, realizing that the facility that Camp Casey has and the program that we have, their facility best suits our program and our traditions. We've been going to camp at Camp Casey since the 1970s, and so we have close to 50 years of tradition involved in camp. I've been a part of the Camp Casey tradition in my 18 years, in all 18 years that I've been, and it's one of the most influential experiences that I ever had in my 5th grade class as a 5th grade teacher prior to becoming a dean. What we notice with going to camp is students get immersion in an outdoor classroom. They get to experience Washington State history and U.S. history with the fort and the lighthouse that's there. They get to go to one of the oldest towns in the state in their field trip to Coopville. Besides the academics and the outdoor experiences like the hike and doing kites and learning survival skills and being there in nature, they also get a tremendous social experience. Meeting kids that they're going to be at middle school, because we go in middle school bands, so they're there with the feeder schools at each of their middle schools. Getting to sing songs, be away from home, having meals with their squads and with their classmates. being away from home and being with their peers for 2 nights. For some of them, the first opportunity to do this. And the other tremendous experience that they get is they get the role modeling from our high school students that are there as counselors from Tahoma High School. We've been doing in the past 2.5-day sessions. So we do a Monday through Wednesday session. The kids come up on Monday, and then on Wednesday, the new group of students come up, and then the old group goes back on those buses. And so we're doing 2.5-day sessions. And so our hope was to be able to do that. Unfortunately, when Camp Casey finally has said in the past few weeks, we're going to be able to open, we're not going to be able to open up at full capacity. We have 687 fifth graders this year across our 6 schools. We take about 80 counselors each session, and then we also have staff up there. So we need beds for about 475 per session. Camp Casey is going to be able to get us about 350 per time because they're not at full capacity. What's limiting Camp Casey is they are a private institution that's owned by SPU. They are still going under Department of Health and L&I regulations that even though there's mitigation techniques that say they can do different things, they feel that they want to stick with some of the regulations that are there because a lot of their buildings lack mechanical ventilation, where they may have heat in the buildings, but there's no air coming in, air going out in a lot of their buildings, and so that's why they're limiting the capacity. Camp Casey is going to be making a significant financial output to bring us in and bringing in portable HEPA filters in all of their spaces to make sure that they're already at the capacity that they're at, that their capacity is also going to be with some ventilation. So we were forced to say, okay, we need to do something different this year. At the same time, when we're looking at we need to do something different, we also have a lot of inflationary impacts that have happened over the last few years. The price of commodities and food has gone up. All of our supply costs have gone up. The transportation costs from 4 years ago that we paid to MTR, who can't do it this year, and the other companies that we've talked to, those transportation costs have more than doubled with the price of fuel and then just the price of charters. The other inflationary impact that's also hit us is the passing of House Bill 1660 that deals with tuition for free and reduced lunch students. So in adding all of these things together and looking at the experiences that we are going to do, we said, okay, we need to do something different, and we can't go, if we were to go for trying to do 3 2.5-day sessions, we felt the cost was going to be way too high for families, and then the impact on our buildings and staffing, where we pull a whole bunch of extra staff to try to bring down our staff to student ratio. The impact of trying to get substitutes for teachers to be up there was just too high. And so our plan B was to look at giving all of our students the experience of Camp Casey with having an overnight. And so we would like to do 4 1.5-day sessions, all taking place the week of April 3rd through 7th, where students will go up for 2 days and 1 night, utilizing much like we did before, that students will go up, and then the next day, the new group of students will come in and then take the old group of students back. So all of the students will still get that experience. We're going to pack in as much as we can with having a lesser amount of students, but we're also going to be able to, before we had such a large group, we couldn't feed all the kids at once. So we had to do 2 meals at each of our meal times. Now, because we have a lower amount of kids in there, we gained some extra time back because we can do meals in 1 session. Still working with some of the things at Camp Casey that may or may not be open, but designing a program that is still going to get the students as much of the same experiences that they got in about 18 hours of a shorter amount of time. So very excited. I know that we also sent you some financials of what we're looking at for camp. Putting everything together right now, we have a cost estimate of about $250 per student. In the past, our PTAs and PTOs have generously granted to each of our fifth grade participants that go up there a $50 grant. So that would bring the cost down to $200 per family. Like we've done in the past, we'll also give families the option of saying, hey, we can pay the whole $250 and have that PTO grant go to help offset the cost of other students that may possibly need that. Longevity and looking forward with this. Next year, we would love to be able to come back to the board and say, we'd like to be back at a 2.5-day camp. At the same time, we also realize that the longevity of this program is also going to be taking us working with our PTAs and PTOs to say, what can we do to get the costs of camp down and affordable for families? Also talking to groups like the Tahoma Schools Foundation and saying, what can we do to rally our community around this program that's been such a vital part of the Tahoma community for so long, to try to bring in some additional finances to bring down the cost. I would be happy to take any questions. Lori and Bill, did I miss anything? All right.
Mr. Addy, I just want to thank you so much for taking this time to do this. It's so easily, you guys could have just said it's not going to work this year. And I cannot imagine the hours that you put into this and all of you making this work. As a previous camper myself many years ago, I know how amazing this experience is. And my older child, my son, was able to experience it. My daughter wasn't able to. But all of the highlights that you mentioned are so incredibly true. And it's just such a rich experience. And from a climate culture perspective, it is so true. When these kids go into middle school, having had that opportunity to cross paths with other kids that they're going to see at their new school, it's huge. So I just want to say thank you so much for pulling this off. And I bet they're just going to love it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you as well. What were the costs before? I don't think I saw that.
Great question. The costs before were $200 per camper. So then we add all the inflationary costs over the last 4 years. That has gone up, and then realistically, the transportation and House Bill 1660 is what skyrocketed to where we're compared to we're also losing a day now.
And then what about why are you using the school bus?
That's a great question. We did talk to Tahoma Transportation just with the lack of drivers that we have right now and lack of subs. We would be taking, for each time that we went up there, we'd be taking 6 buses out of the system and drivers out of the system for the entire day. So there'd be 6 drivers and 6 buses when there's days that I know that we're short 10 or 12 drivers. So that would be on top of that.
Did we look at weekends?
The camp is booked up on a lot of weekends, and then it would also, the staffing for that could be very difficult to do. But right now, we're taking staff and having them there during the school week. Yes, they're giving up time with their family and their lives, but they're not doing it their weekends. So yeah, that is something that we've looked at.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, underrated. My sophomore son, he did Camp Casey, and it's a wonderful experience, and hopefully continue doing it.
Well, I want to ask a quick follow-up question about House Bill 1660. When you mentioned that there are implications for free and reduced lunch students, am I correct in assuming that those families would not need to pay anything?
According to the law, yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure every child has the opportunity to go if their family was unable to pay. So, yes, okay.
I'll again echo, I appreciate all the information that you provided to us and all the hard work you went to finding a way to make a memorable experience for our 5th graders and bring this tradition back to Tahoma. So I'm really excited. My son participated in it too, like some of my colleagues have talked about, and very memorable time. He needed a shower when he came home, but hopefully he's not watching. But it was a really memorable, special experience. He learned a lot, he got a lot out of it. So this is an exciting proposition, so thank you very much. Anything else? Okay, with that, I will call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
I vote aye. So this motion passes 5-0. Thank you, David.
Thank you so much.
All right. That will bring us to agenda item 5.04, first reading of revised policy and procedure 3421, child abuse, neglect, and exploitation prevention. And Special Services Wellness Coordinator Ms. Leonard is here to present to us and answer some questions.
Thank you. Definitely not as fun as Camp Casey. Very important. Not a great one for Valentine's Day, however. This is a WASDA recommendation for an update, and so just a few different updates. Added language on emotional abuse. It wasn't previously well lined out, so it is now. More clear language, just in concise language, changed more for practice and what we already do. Changed to staff instead of naming specific roles because every staff member is a mandatory reporter. So matching current practice. And then changing organizations like to DCYF instead of DSHS, which they used to fall under, now it's DCYF. And then it has great terms and definitions in there, so if anybody's kind of wondering about some of the things or really kind of want to understand and look into a situation, it's got some really good definitions. So that's about it. Any questions?
Yeah, it seemed there was a lot of room for the word exploitation in the policy. Can you explain that? I mean, they had it in the first sentence, they line item out the rest of the policy. Can you explain that?
Yeah, they actually line it out later in there and they talk about exploitation. So they kind of put it in the body as opposed to, and they line it out and did it more definition within the, instead of just using the word, they gave more. So I actually really appreciate this because this goes more with what the law is saying and matches current practice.
Liz, that was my question on the definitions of child abuse. My understanding is that those are defined under statute. Does this language track the statute, or is this policy now creating a separate regime for what constitutes child abuse apart from what the state considers child abuse?
This is lining more aligned to what, as counselors, what we would be looking for as mandatory reporters. So more aligned with what's happening in the law, which is why I think they had the recommendation. So as a lawyer, you probably would have better knowledge of the word statute, but for me and in a practice and what I know for our law and what we're required to do, this matches more closely than what it previously did. So, does that help?
I'm not sure I understand the answer. It's consistent with the practice as a mental health professional. And I think what I don't hear is it's either, and you're understanding, consistent with the law or not. It's saying it's consistent with your practice, but you're not sure if it's consistent with.
As far as I know, it is.
It is.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And just for clarity, to bounce this off again for anybody that's listening, there are several legal references at the bottom of the policy to RCWs and so forth. So I think that's it. Any question? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. That will bring us to agenda item 5.05, first reading of revised policy 2411, certificate of educational competency. Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, Don Wakely, is on her way. So let's answer questions for the board. Hey, Don. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Thank you. In this particular policy, there are some rules that govern when students can seek a certificate of or high school equivalency. And to do that, we don't actually issue those ourselves. it either happens at the state level, but we have to be able to essentially release those students from the regular high school program to be able to go and take that test and to see if they can earn a high school equivalency certificate. So this particular policy kind of governs that, and I tried to explain that for you.
I have a question for you. The policy, I think, does a good job of using language leaving the regular high school education program. It says that phrase several times. And there was one instance that stood out to me where we don't use that. And as I was reading through this, I was thinking of a variety of scenarios where this might apply, where students would need to utilize this particular avenue. Some of them which had positive elements to them. And there's a paragraph toward the end where the last sentence says that essentially they would need a parent or guardian to buy off on this if they wanted to drop out of school. And that phrase, dropping out, caught my eye and has a negative connotation to it. And I'm wondering if we could substitute some language there to go along with the regular high school education.
Sure.
program.
Sure.
Something along
You have a suggestion?
I do. Leading the regular high school education program.
So it just reflects that same.
Yeah, that's saying just that it's there throughout the policy. Okay. Thank you. That brings us, we're going to, let's see, 5.06, which is the first reading revised policy 5408, jury duty and subpoena leave. Assistant Director of Human Resources Scott Mitchell is on with the chair.
Good evening, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day.
And you.
This is around jury duty, and we changed the language that aligns with the negotiated agreements and amendments.
Questions? Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. As you'll all recall, we're tabling item 5.07, which brings us to 5.08. First reading of revised policy 6800, safety operations and maintenance of district property. Assistant Director of Operations Kyle Hood is here to
Good evening.
Hi.
Mine might have the smallest amount of changes, 3 words. It is the removal of grades, transcripts, or, according to the law, we are not allowed to withhold those, so we are striking this one.
All right. Okay, all right. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kyle. That brings us to agenda item 5.09, first reading of revised policy 6216, reimbursement for goods and services warrants. Chief Financial Officer Leonard is back.
Hello again.
Hi.
All right, this policy is about the district's practice when it comes to paying for goods and services via warrants. To provide some context, warrants are basically a check, but instead of a check being pulled from a commercial bank account, we call it a warrant because it's pulled from a state account. No major updates to this practice procedure. Last time it was updated, I was 4 years old, 25 years ago. So just trying to get in line with our current laws.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. That brings us to section 6 of our agenda, meeting management portion of our meeting, and to agenda item 6.01, our consent agenda. May I please have a motion to approve our consent agenda?
I move to approve agenda item 6.01, action to approve consent agenda.
Williams moved and Pendergrass seconded. Any discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Brings us to agenda item 6.02, our coach personnel report. May I please have a motion to approve our coach personnel report?
Yeah, I move to approve agenda item 6.02, action to approve coach personnel report, I believe as provided.
We're going to move and Director Pendergraft seconded. Any discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion passes 5-0, which brings us to agenda item 7.01, our adjournment at 7:19 p.m. Happy Valentine's Day. Please stay safe out there. Stay warm. Thanks, everybody.